Tonight's show is presented by Glenn Smith Chevrolet GMC in Opelika. Get ready to smile.
Hello, baseball fans. You're watching On Deck with Tyler Redmond.
Hey everybody, and thank you for tuning in tonight. Really do appreciate it. While you're here, do us a favor. Of course, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications so that you can stay up to date with everything going on here at On Deck. And of course, with your Atlanta Braves, we're not going to waste any time tonight. We have a special guest, Wiley Ballard, the Georgia Sportscaster of the Year for the year 2024, joins the show. And Wiley, thank you so much for being here, man.
Tyler, I'm happy to. As you can see, I'm not currently in Georgia. I am out west enjoying some time off, so I'm bundled up. But excited to be here, and yeah, it's been quite a couple weeks. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, man. So tell me about finding out that you won that award, and of course, it's the culmination of everything that you've worked for up until this point. So tell me about finding out about that.
Well, I think you find out you got nominated around Thanksgiving. Dave Gorin does a great job with the National Sports Media Association. It's an organization I've been familiar with for a long time. It's been around for, I think, 65 years now. So certainly something I was aware of. And, there's no big secret. I just got a phone call about the first weekend of the new year saying that I, had been named the Georgia Sportscaster of the Year. And to be quite honest with you, I didn't tell my family or anything because I wasn't totally convinced that they hadn't mixed something up. I really was very surprised by it. And then after I kind of got over the initial shock, just very humbled by it. I think, I said this earlier, just a lot of people have helped me a lot over the last 10 to 15 years I've been pursuing this. So I hope a lot of those people take some ownership in this recognition.
For sure. None of us get where we are without any help, for sure. But Wiley, I got to say, I'm in the business a little bit too, but the path that you've had this year, of course, for me, I think the first time I saw you was on TV for the Braves, right? But you're everywhere. It feels like you don't turn down a job, right? Whether it's Georgia Tech, whether it's college football, basketball, volleyball, you do a lot. Out of all those sports, man, I got to ask, what's your favorite?
Well, I make no secret about it. Baseball's my favorite. I just fell in love with it, particularly in middle school and high school when I started to consume, some of, I don't know, I guess the nerdy type of content from places like Baseball America, Fangraphs, and started reading, some of the great columnists. Thomas Boswell is always a guy who I've turned to. Read a lot of baseball literature. I just fell in love with it when I was about a teenager. So baseball's my favorite. But to your point, Tyler, in the business, it's very rare where it's you can afford to turn down a job, especially when you're trying to get out and get things started. So for me, that was one of the first pieces of advice I got was just never say no, even if it's a sport you don't know as well. Just take advantage of the opportunity and try and learn it, and it'll put some hair on your chest, I guess, if you start covering sport. Like flag football is a good example for me. I've done a lot of that the last few years, but I didn't know very much about it at all. Volleyball, probably in the same boat, going back 7-8 years ago.
No doubt about it. And I got to say, you're a Georgia guy, right? I know you went to Tech. Are you from Georgia?
Born and raised in Atlanta, yes, sir.
So being that as it may, I know you grew up watching the Braves, and as did I. So for me, being around the team and having the opportunity, whether it be to go to the clubhouse or whether it be to just be there for the games, that is one of the coolest things I've ever done in my career. Where does that rank for you?
Oh, number one. My dad's from Atlanta. He actually grew up going to Atlanta Crackers games, which dates him a little bit. He was in high school when the Braves first showed up here in '66. But no, it means the world, man. I like so many Braves fans out there from the Metro Atlanta area. I remember going to Turner Field, at least for our generation, going to Turner Field with buddies on a Friday night, getting the $1 tickets, hanging out and watching Chipper and the rest of those guys, in the mid 2000s and on into the next era, the Jair Jurgens, the Tommy Hanson, the Chris Medlin. Those are kind of my guys, from my most passionate Braves fandom days. And yeah, as somebody who's from Atlanta, my dad's from Atlanta, my grandfather was born in Atlanta. It has been one of the most fulfilling opportunities for me to cover, my favorite sport with my hometown team, and yeah, I mean, that's about all I can say about it. It's been difficult to describe. People have asked me about it this past year.
Absolutely. Really, I first got started going this year. This was kind of the first that I would regularly, be in the press box at least 3, 4 times a month. I try to get up to Atlanta and do that. I think the coolest moment out of those, it was unexpected for me. I didn't expect it to happen that day, was when the Braves clinched the wild card. I was there for that. Wasn't expecting to be covered in champagne by the time I left, but of course, that's what happened. And I know you were in there. I want to say I saw you through the chaos, but a cool moment that was. And of course, we're hoping for more like that this year.
Well, Ty, it's been a tradition now. I mean, but playoffs and 7 straight seasons going back to 2018, so no reason to think anything's going to change, especially with the expanded playoffs. But yeah, it was really cool. I was in there. I was trying to wrangle interviews, for Valley, now FanDuel Sports coverage, helping out Brandon and Hannah, trying to make sure we got as many faces on television as possible. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I grew up in Atlanta. I'm a Braves fan. I tried really hard to kind of check that at the door, but there were a few times you look around and just kind of go, man, this is pretty cool.
No doubt about that. And when I look at the staff that you guys have there at Bally, just a terrific bunch of guys that have been put together, particularly the broadcast team, you included. It seems like a well-oiled machine, right? And what kind of environment is that? And it's got to be pretty cool to do that every day of the year, right?
Yeah, and I think I actually have a unusual perspective on it because I first started working with that group in 2020. I actually, when Gretchen Caney, who's the producer of Braves Baseball and Television, she's been involved with the show, I think, since the mid-2000s. She won't be happy I said that, but that's the reality of it. She, too, grew up a Braves fan, born and raised in Decatur. And she's been one of the, I'd say, I don't want to say unsung hero because, we sing her praises all the time, but certainly less visible hero of Braves television, really in the post-TBS era. She's been kind of the heart and soul of it. And, look, I know I knew Brandon in college. He was the voice of Georgia Tech when I was a student there, so got to know him then. But really, over the last 4 years, 5 years now, working behind the scenes in the television truck, I've learned a lot about television. I learned a lot about Braves baseball, but I think the most fun part has been getting to work with some people who have been a part of this show for well over a decade. I think that's one of the coolest things about Braves baseball is that when you have an opportunity to be on this show, and I'm not talking about on air, but just if you have a chance to be a replay operator, or you have a chance to be a graphics coordinator, or even a cameraman, those people don't leave. And I think that's, for a number of reasons. One, I think the Braves have a massive audience. It's a very prestigious regional sports show. You can make an argument it might be the most watched regional sports produced team broadcast in the country of any sport, just given the wide scope of Braves country across the Southeast and even beyond that to the national fan base that was built with TBS back in the 80s and 90s. But I think, so one, it's prestigious, but two, I think the culture is really good. I tell people nobody has more fun producing baseball than Braves television does, and I hope that comes through over the air. But I think there's a lot of people working behind the scenes who, having worked for the Braves for 10, 15 years, probably just as passionate as any of the fans watching. And it's a real privilege and opportunity. I think where we really shine is when we're able to go back and find something from, say, 20 years ago. And just at the drop of a hat, our replay operator knows, oh, yeah, that reminds me of, when Eddie Perez was catching Smoltz back in May of 2003 or something like that. So I think that continuity really helps us deliver what feels like, this is going to be a loose connection, but I've heard baseball compared to soap opera. It's kind of like a soap opera. It's every day. It happens, every year. The storylines are continuous, and I think one of the reasons Braves television does so well is because of that crew and the continuity and the passion they have for Braves baseball, and that's probably been the biggest thrill for me the last 4 to 5 years, going, from just being a Braves fan to watching, every game, whether it was on Fox Sports South or Valley Sports and now FanDuel Sports here coming. Now getting a chance to be a part of it behind the scenes and know some of the people that make that magic happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned Eddie Perez. It's funny. I'm scrolling through your Instagram right now. There's a picture of you interviewing Eddie Perez, and it got me thinking. Even before you said that, you got the opportunity. Really, any given day, it could happen where you're talking to someone you probably watched growing up. Is there ever a pinch me moment? Right? Like for me, if Chipper Jones walked in, I got to interview Chipper Jones. That'd be unstoppable. Just I can't believe that happened.
It's funny. I mean, look, I've had a bunch of those. One that comes to mind, Brian McCann, just because he kind of came up, made his debut in '05, right when I was starting to get really into Braves baseball, and so he was definitely one. But the one I tell people that people are surprised to hear, but we all have kind of our favorite players, like kind of oh, he's my guy. Like everybody loves Chipper, everybody loves BMAC. Those are kind of mainstream, but if you're a big Braves fan, there's usually a couple guys who, off the beaten path. And my guy was Jair Jurgens. I loved Jair Jurgens. He's the only jersey I ever had, like that had a specific name on it. And he was in the alumni softball home run derby this year. And of all the pitch me moments of, talking to, again, Chipper, BMAC, Mark Wohlers, during alumni weekend, with all due respect to those guys, just because of my personal, like, I kind of hitched my wagon to Jair Jurgens, back when he was first coming up in the late 2000s. That was really cool. I know that's a peculiar one, but I think
No, no.
baseball kind of lends itself to everybody's kind of got that unique favorite player, right? And Jair was my guy.
You mentioned that alumni softball game. I was there that day. For perspective here, Jair Jurgens pitched the first game I ever went to in the ballpark. Okay, that was the
No
generation
kidding.
of me being when I was a kid. It was him.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm in the elevator riding up to the press box. All of a sudden, Jurgens steps in, and I'm in the elevator riding up. And I was like, "How you doing, Jair? I know who he is, obviously." He goes, "Oh, you recognize me?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "You were on the ticket I had from day one, first game I ever went to." So we kind of got a similar thing there for sure, Wiley. It's a deep cut, but it's a good one for sure. Jair
Yes,
Jurgens,
absolutely. Yeah.
no doubt about it.
If that cartilage in his knee is held up, I think he could have had a much longer career. He was the truth when he was healthy.
I think that's so true for so many of our Braves players. But let's talk a little bit about the current Braves situation. Of course, no Charlie Morton, no Max Fried entering 2025. We have a little bit of a gap there in the starting rotation. Bullpen has some concerns. In your opinion, and I don't know if you've heard anything, but in your opinion, what do you think the priority is in terms of obtaining players or developing players to be ready for 2025?
Well, I think, Mark Bowman put out his opening day roster, way too early prediction a couple of days ago, and you've obviously got Sale, Lopez, and Swellenbach. They're slotted in those first three starting rotation spots. Spencer Strider coming back from injury. Hopefully he's back as soon as possible and able to be the same pitcher he's been. Behind that, Mark put down for the time being that Grant Holmes and Ian Anderson were going to be your number 4 and number 5 starters. Now, Ian had an ERA around 4, in AAA last year, pitched a little over 50 innings. So, again, he's a guy who's still trying to get back fully, pitched at a number of different levels coming off Tommy John surgery. So he's certainly a name that I'm intrigued by. I mean, that's a guy who, look, I understand the last couple of years he hasn't been heard from, but you look at what he did, the World Series run, and even the year after that before getting hurt in 2022, and in the playoffs in 2020. I mean, the guy has had a lot of success, big-time success at the major league level. So if he's fully healthy, I'm intrigued to see what he could offer you. Grant Holmes, look, I would have told you a year ago I didn't think he was going to be a big piece of the bullpen. He wound up being a huge piece of the bullpen. So far be it from me to tell him something he can't do. But I think that really is the question, right? Where does the money that is available for obtaining players outside the organization go? Is it going to go to the rotation? Is it going to go to the bullpen? Is it going to go to the outfield? And for me, I think in today's era of baseball, Tyler, you can still build a pitching staff almost from back to front. And I understand that gets people nervous. I'm not suggesting, look, you need to have 7 or 8 starters for the regular season. There's no question about that. Just with injuries and depth and just the amount of innings you have to cover, you need more than those 5, 6, 7 guys. But when it comes to, who are the guys you want in your playoff roster come October, I still think, I think we saw the Phillies do it a couple years ago. It's really been over the last 10 years. I think they could pour some resources into the bullpen and still have that be a World Series caliber pitching staff, even if it doesn't have, that typical, 1-2 punch or even 1-2-3 punch in some cases. So for me, I think they like some pieces they have pitching wise. I mean, I know one name that Mark was particularly excited about was Blake Burkhalter, who I saw pitch at Auburn as their closer, great cutter. He could be a valuable piece of the bullpen. You've still got A.J. Smith-Shawver, who is so young. I think it's so easy to forget how young he is because we've seen a fair amount of him these last couple of years. But I think A.J. can, again, if nothing else, help you eat some innings. Still curious about Hurston Waldrop. Drew Hackenberg's a guy who had a lot of success in the ACC with Virginia Tech. He's a top 10 prospect for the Braves in the organization now. So look, far be it from me to tell Anthopoulos what to do, but my train of thought is kind of, look, I think the offense is going to be closer to 2023 than it was last year. I'm not sure it's going to be 2023. That was historic. But I think the offense is going to be much better. And with that in mind, I think you can still win a lot of games with a good offense with Ian Anderson and A.J. Smith-Shawver, Grant Holmes starting when you're facing teams, in the bottom half of the league. I think that's something that is you've got to keep in mind with the offense that you're going to have, and the offense I think they're going to have. You can win some games against some subpar pitching staffs. You can let's say beat the Marlins, 7-5, or you can beat the Rockies, 8-6. I think you can win some of those games in the regular season, and for me, that's kind of where I'm looking to, pour some resources into the bullpen and let some of these younger guys get some shots in those starting rotation opportunities.
Well, I think you're right because we've heard, at least through the rumor mill, that the Braves were in on Jeff Hoffman. We've heard figures thrown around and that kind of thing. We know there were at least conversations. We've heard they're in on Tanner Scott, an elite reliever to the effect of Tanner Scott. That could just completely change the dynamic of the pen, especially when you consider the loss of an A.J. Minter. Jesse Chavez has hit free agency. You have a lot of moving pieces there. How much do you think shoring up the bullpen gives Brian Snitker maybe some security in those late innings?
I hate to tell you, Tyler, again, just one man's opinion, I'd make the bullpen the priority at this point, unless you're going to play at the Corbin. Obviously Corbin Burns is off the board now. But unless you're playing at that top end of the starting rotation market, I think I'm at a point where I'd rather have elite relievers. And the name you didn't mention, Joe Jimenez, he may not be available at all this year. That's a huge loss. In fact, and again, maybe I'm crazy, but I would almost say the loss of Joe Jimenez potentially may even be more significant than seeing Charlie Morton walk out, out of that fifth spot in the rotation, just because I think bullpen is such a critical part of winning in October. And again, maybe if you want to accuse me taking for granted, some of those wins against lesser opponents in the months of May, June, and July, I think you can rely on your offense to outslug some teams while you have some younger starters get some opportunities. That's kind of how I would play it, I guess. So for me, Tanner Scott is extremely attractive. And look, I'm not convinced A.J. Minter's not coming back. I don't know what's out there in the market for him, but I think he's a guy who could potentially find his way back to Atlanta.
I completely agree with you. I had a conversation with AJ the night of the celebration for clinching the wild card, and it did not come as to me that that's the last time that I'm going to see him in that clubhouse. It just didn't give off that kind of vibe. The growth he's had in that clubhouse, the personal connections he's made in that clubhouse, I feel like he's a team guy. The only way I could see AJ Minter leaving is if it's back to Texas in some capacity. That's the attraction for Minter to me.
Yeah, and again, keep in mind, the Braves, only organization he's known since he left from Texas A&M to join professional baseball. He's been a Brave his whole professional career. 1, 2, they've won a lot since he's been here. And look, that's not always guaranteed when you leave an organization, and you might have to take a little bit of a risk. And on top of that, he lives in the Battery. I mean, look, I can tell you this much. A.J. Minter has thoroughly enjoyed his time as a Brave. I think he feels comfortable here. And keep in mind, you never know how other teams are going to react. And I say react, what the offers are going to be for a guy like A.J. coming off what was a pretty serious injury that hindered a lot of his 2024 season. So it might be a situation where, you know what, maybe it's a one-year deal in Atlanta, kind of wants to reestablish his value and try and dominate as one of the top lefties, top lefty relievers in baseball. Again, I'm not convinced that A.J. Minter is not back in the Braves uniform. It just may take a little while as he tries to figure out, well, what are teams really willing to offer me, and what is Atlanta offering? How big is that gap?
No doubt about it. I personally, if I had to bet on it, I think AJ winds up back with the Braves. That's my personal hope anyway. But beyond that, Wiley, you know as well as I do that anytime the offseason comes around, crazy theories are going to be thrown out there, and we're going to hear all kinds of different speculation about who the Braves could go get. You mentioned focusing on those younger starting pitchers. How feasible do you think it is that the Braves go after Max Scherzer? We've seen Justin Verlander get signed. How feasible do you think it is at the right price that Alex Anthopoulos signs Max Scherzer?
I think it's very feasible, quite honestly. I mean, and I think you've almost kind of seen a trend of that with Alex Anthopoulos. Went and got Chris Sale. We signed up Charlie Morton. You go way back, and I think this is before Alex's time, but he had R.A. Dickey and Anibal Sanchez. I think Justin Verlander just signed a deal. So I think there's still value for those guys, and at the right price, yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, but my only concern there is that right price. It may not happen because look, the guy is going to be a Hall of Famer. I think he ought to be first ballot, and we've seen what starting pitching costs now. I mean, Charlie Morton, got $15 million after what was a so-so year. Now, again, like Max or like Charlie, Max is older, but probably has a bit more of a pedigree. And again, starting pitching, it's hard for me to imagine that it's going to be less than, 17, $18 million to try and get Scherzer signed up for a year. And, if you look at where the Braves payroll is right now, the general school of thought, I suppose, is they've got around $25 million to spread across before you hit that first luxury tax threshold. So, I'm not saying it wouldn't be a good use to $17, $18 million, but it would limit what else you could do, in the reliever market, or even if you're trying to add an outfielder or somebody who's got a little more proven track record than some of the options you currently have on your bench.
This is kind of a deep cut, but look, you mentioned the luxury tax and where the Braves may or may not be in that. What are the chances that the Braves go over it once again for the third consecutive season?
I mean, look, I think Alex has been very clear that he gets a budget from ownership, and he's going to work within that budget. I think the Braves, there have been times, obviously, where it sounds like they're going to be adding to the payroll. I think the way I kind of look at it, Tyler, if we sit here on March 27th, 10 weeks from now, and the Braves are under the luxury tax, I'm not convinced that's where you're going to be come October 1st. I think there might be one of those situations where you're willing to take on some money at the trade deadline if that means you improve your chances of becoming a better, postseason team. So, you see so many GMs, they like to have that little extra bit of spending money, handy. They don't want to max out their budget come game one. They want to have room to make a deal come the end of July. So for me, maybe that's something else. Alex sits there and says, okay, why don't we just, keep some cushion between us and the luxury tax. So once we identify what that biggest need is it the bullpen? Is it the rotation? Is it the outfield? Has something else happened, over the course of those first 3.5 months where you have to make a move? I think Alex has constantly preached two things: flexibility and upside. And I think saving some money, again, look, everything is so contingent on what deals are available. I'm not suggesting that Alex is going to pass up something that, makes a lot of sense before the season. But, look, having an extra 10, 15 million to work with going into the trade deadline is not a bad thing.
I completely agree with you. And when you look at this past year, how many injuries that the Braves had, a lot of people want to find someone to blame or something to blame. To me, there's no question last year, if you want to blame anything on whatever level of success the Braves didn't get to, it's injuries. And that's, to me, it's obvious that that's what it is. When you look at this year and you look at what you have coming back that maybe didn't have the year they should have last year based on the injuries. Of course, at some point we're going to get Strider back. At some point you're going to get Acuna back. How much do you think that Atlanta's front office is maybe depending on that being the case when they all inevitably do return healthy?
I think, look, I think first and foremost, regardless of any financial commitments, I would bet on that to begin with. There's an old adage about how injuries aren't an excuse, and I think maybe that applies inside a clubhouse during the season, because you don't want to let that creep in your mind, and affect how you approach the game in front of you. But as an outsider, or even looking back in hindsight, I'd argue injuries are the best excuse because it's critical. You lost the reigning MVP and the Cy Young Award favorite in the first. You lost Spencer Strider in the first 2-3 weeks, and you didn't even have Ronald Acuna. By the time summer rolled around, so you lost perhaps two of the best players in baseball. So critical injuries, and I think that's how you have to look at how this team is built. What the way it has been constructed. You have to rely upon guys like Spencer Strider, Ronald Acuna Jr. Austin Riley lost him for the last month and a half. Relying upon a guy like Michael Harris. You have made those deals long term. Which again on paper looked awfully team friendly. And I think a lot of people around the league looked around and said, "Oh my gosh, the Braves have just locked in a core that's going to be World Series contenders for the next 5 to 6 years." Well, if that's the case, if that's the plan, then you have to rely on the plan. And I think, who are you going to get on the free agent market that has a chance to bounce back better than a guy like Matt Olson? I know his wasn't injury related, but man, the second half he had, it's tempting to me to think he could put together another monster year. Sean Murphy, I think, is the big question, right? I think, when it comes to catchers, offensively, you never know how fatigue's going to play in. But look, he knows he's got a big year in front of him. He had to hear it a lot, I'm sure, from people from the outside barking about, the production he wasn't having. But I think you talk to any player, those first 2 months, having an oblique happen on opening day just could not have been worse timing. And I think he's also poised for a big bounce back. So for me, I look at the Braves and say this is still a team that is going to need to be – its identity has got to be the offense. And it's hard to have your identity as the offense when your 4 or 5 best offensive players are hurt. So, if I'm in the front office seat or if I'm in Brian Snitker's seat, I'm looking around and saying, well, if our guys are healthy, we're good to go, man. This is, again, with 7 teams in the National League making the playoffs, it's a postseason team, and they've got a chance to do some real damage. In fact, you look at the last few years, Tyler, the real differentiator in the postseason has been who can hit. If so long we've talked about, well, who's got the top 2 starters who can just give you, 8 innings of 1-run baseball 4 times in a 7-game series. It feels like more than ever, it's who's got somebody who can actually hit this pitching, because the pitching is so good right now. If you've got guys who can hit playoff caliber pitching and, again, impact the baseball, because the idea of stringing 3 hits together just becomes, less and less realistic, it feels like, in this era of power arms and pitch design and all that type of stuff. And I think the Braves are poised to be really strong in what could be a differentiating, skill, I guess, run scoring when it comes to winning in October. I think the Braves are still in a really good position for that.
Well, let me ask you this. You brought up Sean Murphy, which I was going to go there, but I'm going to switch gears with this. The new hitting coach, with the loss now of Kevin Seitzer, they're moving in a different direction. How much do you think that is going to help a guy like Sean Murphy, like Matt Olson? I would even throw Austin Riley in there too, who just didn't quite match the 2023 versions of themselves. Even a guy like Orlando Arcia, who you mentioned Sean Murphy getting the criticism. Orlando Arcia received a ton of it, so much so that, a large part of the fan base wanted Willie Adames, prior to this season. And where do you think that is coming from? Do you think that could help those guys and maybe just a different approach? And how much do you think just focusing on not worrying so much about the long ball could help them as well?
Well, I think, there's a lot in that question. So I guess I'll start with the first thing I want to say is, Kevin Seitzer, keep in mind, oversaw the 2023 offense, which is one of the top in baseball history. He was the longest tenured hitting coach for many, many years. And I think you talk to anybody in major league coaching circles, they'll say the most tenuous job is major league hitting coach, because it's just something that, gets a lot of attention, especially when things aren't going well. And I think, I think if you look at Seitz on the course of his whole career, he's a quality hitting coach. And But at the same time, I think, in any organization, whether it's baseball or corporate America, there can be some help for a new voice. Things can feel stale. You need a little bit of a refresh. I mean, look at Theo Epstein at the end of his tenures in both Boston and Chicago. He kind of needed a new voice. And so I think that happens to even the best when it comes to leadership roles. A new voice can help. So having said all of that, I think it would be naive to think that the only coaches that are talking to major league hitters right now are the hitting coaches, right? And what I mean by that is, there's a lot of outside coaching that goes on in Major League Baseball and across the baseball industry. And I think one of the strengths moving forward for the Braves, could be kind of just bringing those two together, with, whether it's somebody who's been working a lot with a given player outside the organization. And it's all about communication, right? I mean, it's just trying to make sure everybody's on the same page. But when it comes to hitting coaches, in my mind, in this era of Major League Baseball, I think so much of it comes down to game planning. How are we going to beat sorry, I'm blanking. I'm trying to think of how are we going to beat Sandy Alcantara tonight? What is the game plan? What is the conversation hours before the game? What pitches are we trying to lay off? What pitches are we hunting? And I think that's where a hitting coach can make a real impact. And so that's the thing I'm probably most curious about, is to see what the game planning looks like offensively for the Braves.
I think you're absolutely right. When you look at the hiring of Tim Hires, I want to focus on that too. Obviously, you mentioned the refresh. A guy who has had a lot of success over the years. The Braves wanted him a few years ago. That didn't work out, but they got him now. They're bringing him in. What kind of approach do you think that the Braves looked at him and said, yeah, we want to give this a shot. We like what he brings to the table. What do you think it was?
Well, I mean, again, I think it goes back to his experience, right? I mean, he was highly thought of, across the industry. He's been in that hitting coach seat before. And, like you said, it's a different voice. Maybe it's a younger voice. And, I'm sure we'll learn more as we go through spring training and hear some more about philosophy and even the early months of the season. But for me, again, I'm really curious to see how they go about game planning on a given day. And look, I'm sure as I know, it can be tough to get specifics on that, just because it is such a competitive advantage, or it can be such a meaningful. It can have a meaningful impact on the outcome of a game, right? On whether you do well. So it's not, I don't think we're going to get a lot of answers from guys like Snit or Coach Hires or anybody else about how, we were really, we were trying to, look, see Scherzer's fastball out and away, or, we were really trying to lay off that breaking ball, from, a guy like Jeff Hoffman pitching for the Blue Jays or whatnot. So it may be hard to get specifics on, but that is kind of what I'm curious is to see, how cohesive is the plan 1 through 9 offensively when you're facing a pitcher with, one strength or another. I'm curious to see how it varies from game to game based on the starter and the type of pitcher you're facing.
Wiley, I want to thank you again for joining the show, man. Really do appreciate it. You took the time. I guess you're on a ski trip. I don't know what exactly it is, but really appreciate you taking the time to join the show. You didn't have to, and we really appreciate it, man.
It's my pleasure. Baseball's a long season, so this is kind of my summer vacation here in January before things get rolling down in Florida. So, yeah, enjoying some snow, and, fingers crossed I come back in one piece. You don't see me with a sling or a cast or something come spring training next month.
You're a braver man than me. I don't touch the skis. That's not for me. Wiley, thank you very much. When we return, of course, we will get into some regularly scheduled content. We're going to talk about Scherzer. We're going to talk about Tanner Scott, and, of course, all of the pitching concerns with the Atlanta Braves at the moment. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
In 2025, we're hammering down high prices at Glenn Smith GMC in Opelika. New GMC Sierra 4x4 crew cabs, discounted up to $12,000 off. GMC Terrain with a roomy cabin and pro safety, discounted up to $7,000 off. Enjoy the new year with no payments for 120 days. Choose from over 500 new and used vehicles on the lot or on the way. GlennSmith.com. Get ready to smile. In 2025, we're hammering down high prices at Glenn Smith Chevrolet in Opelika. New Chevy Silverado 4x4 crew cabs, discounted up to $12,000 off. Brand new 2025 Chevy Equinox, the compact SUV with high-tech features, discounted up to $5,000 off. Enjoy the new year with no payments for 120 days. Choose from over 500 new and used vehicles on the lot or on the way. GlennSmith.com. Get ready to smile.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for tuning in tonight. Really do appreciate it. And thank you again to Wiley Ballard, who took the time out of his vacation to join the show. We're planning on doing more guest-type segments, just like you just saw with more Braves figures, Braves media, maybe even some former players, things like that. Now that we do have the capability, of course, we're going to battle some technical difficulties as we go on, but really appreciate you guys hanging around for that. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And hopefully we can get, again, more interviews with Wiley down the road, maybe even some in-person interviews here in the studio as well. But, again, thank you to Wiley Ballard. And, again, thank you for being here tonight to all of you out there. Off-season content, we got a lot to talk about. The Braves, we've talked about it a lot. We talked about it in the segment with Wiley earlier. But there's the biggest concern right now, no doubt about it, is starting pitching, right? And bullpen. Pitching in general is the concern. That is where we're at. But I asked Wiley Ballard this earlier. Is Max Scherzer a good fit in Atlanta? Could that be the case? He's a surefire Hall of Famer. We know that. He's probably going to go in first ballot. He has the accolades, 3-time Cy Young, 8-time All-Star, 2-time World Series. The only concern I have is this. It's that he's 40 years old. He will turn 41 in late July. The past 2 seasons, he has not reached 50 innings. There's a lot of concern there. Now, a lot of people are going to say that, well, Tyler, that means that we shouldn't touch this. And I agree with you in large part. But I would also say that just because the numbers may not have been there the past couple of years, doesn't mean you shouldn't touch it at all, because I think you can at least have a conversation. I don't want to pay Max Scherzer even what Charlie Morton is making based on the last couple of years, not because he's pitched bad, but because he hasn't pitched consistently. I think that helps you in negotiations. I think if you can get Max Scherzer for $10 million or less, you do it. The problem is, I don't believe you're going to have a situation where Scherzer is going to want to take less than that unless he just has a desire to continue pitching, which he may. I'm not sure. But what I do think is this. The Braves need some kind of, I would say, some kind of consistency in the starting rotation, right? You have 2 empty spots, at least temporarily. We broke that down last week. Strider will be back at some point. I would imagine around May-ish. If you're lucky, that's at least the thought. We don't know what he's going to pitch like once he is back, but that is where we're at as of right now. We'll see how it goes, but at least until then, you're going to have 2 empty slots. You for sure have 1 empty slot for the entirety of the season that you at least don't have just a guaranteed name for, right? We spoke earlier about Ian Anderson, Bryce Elder, A.J. Smith-Shawver, Grant Holmes, all possibly competing in spring training for those slots. And I think that's a possibility. And I will say this. I would say that I think your money goes further in the bullpen because you can spend less and get more pitchers in quantity. That will probably not cover as many innings, but you can use some of these guys I just mentioned in your starter role and really hunker down on the bullpen and make that the focus. And look, Max Scherzer last year, he only started 9 games. From June to September, he had a 2-4 win-loss record. He had a close to a 4 ERA. He's got a career 3.16 ERA because Stone Cold said so. To me, it comes down to the dynamic of the team. Does the front office want to spend money on the starting rotation at all? Do they want to limit how much they spend? If so, that goes to help this point. I'm not sure just yet. I'm curious to see where we go from here and what happens. What I will say is I don't think it's likely, mainly because we've already heard that the Braves are targeting bullpen pieces. They're having conversations with Tanner Scott. They were in on Jeff Hoffman, had an offer out for, I want to say, 5 years, $45 million, something along those lines. Didn't work out. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. But it comes down to the dynamic of the team. What's available, what makes sense, and what Alex Anthopoulos can make happen without breaking the bank. That, to me, is where I think this is going to, really come from, is what's in front of Alex Anthopoulos, what can he do to make the team better? And it may be, just like Wiley Ballard said earlier, it may be that the Braves decide, you know what, we're going to hold until the trade deadline, because there will likely be more available at the deadline. You may be able to trade for some pieces that otherwise wouldn't be available unless their teams stuck it up this year, which we saw what the White Sox did last year. You may be able to capitalize on some fire sales at the deadline and address a need or multiple needs that you didn't know you had on opening day, right? Right now, we think everybody's going to be healthy and everything's going to be fine. We learned last year, can't count on that necessarily. So I think it's going to come down to the dynamics of the team. I think it's going to really matter with how this team is shaped and how this team performs in spring training. That's going to be, I think, the main caveat here is, I hate to say I think they're going to wait that long, but I don't think Scherzer is exactly a name that makes you go, at least at this point in his career, that makes you go, yes, we will spend $15 million on Max Scherzer. If this was 3 years ago, maybe. Even after his time with the Dodgers, maybe. But he hasn't been the guy that he was in the first 10 years of his career. He hasn't been consistently able to even take the mound, much less consistent on the mound. So it's a tough situation. I would venture to say no. I would venture to say that I don't think it's going to happen, but at the right price, it could. There's been a lot of chatter about this. I don't think Max Scherzer is the guy that they're targeting. I don't think that is at all where the Braves are going from here. I think it would have to be that Max Scherzer expressed interest in pitching for the Braves and would take a sweet hometown deal for an opportunity, for a chance at maybe proving himself in a one-year deal, or having a last hurrah, or having one more chance at a World Series, or something to that effect. I think it's going to come down to something like that. And look, again, Max Scherzer, surefire Hall of Famer, but he's not a surefire 2025 Atlanta Brave. That's the way I view it. When we return, we're going to talk about Jeff Hoffman and whether or not the Braves missed out by not signing Jeff Hoffman. Stay with us.
In 2025, we're hammering down high prices at Glenn Smith GMC in Opelika. New GMC Sierra 4x4 crew cabs, discounted up to $12,000 off. GMC Terrain with a roomy cabin and pro safety, discounted up to $7,000 off. Enjoy the new year with no payments for 120 days. Choose from over 500 new and used vehicles on the lot or on the way. GlennSmith.com. Get ready to smile.
Welcome back, and again, special thank you to our sponsor, Glenn Smith Chevrolet. They have been phenomenal for us, not only this upcoming season, but also this past season. Really helping making this improve. If you've noticed, we've added some new graphics, we've added some new just abilities here. That is due to their support, and if you're out there, we are looking for additional sponsors. So if you're out there and you'd like to sponsor the channel, email me. You can find my email on the contact page of my channel. You can also just you can find me. You can find me on social media as well. Let's get into this. Let's talk about this Jeff Hoffman thing. Did the Braves miss out on Jeff Hoffman? This is a topic that I didn't think we'd talk about a week or two ago. Look, Jeff Hoffman, solid righty reliever, former Philadelphia Philly. We've seen him plenty over the past couple of years. He was an all-star this past year, had a really solid season, and really what this comes down to, the reason we're talking about it, is apparently the Braves and the Orioles were both in on Jeff Hoffman for big-time deals. They backed out of it, though, after getting his physical. And there's a lot of people out there that don't like it. There's a lot of people out there that think the Braves got cold feet and are blaming Alex Anthopoulos for not going there. Personally, I think Jeff Hoffman's a great player, but who am I to question the Braves medical staff or Braves staff in general on determining they should or should not spend money in a certain situation, right? They obviously didn't like what they saw in MRIs, and they backed out of it for that reason. This could go one of two ways. This could either be the Braves were experts, and 2 years from now he blows out his arm. Hopefully that doesn't happen, I'm just saying. Or it could go the complete opposite. It could go, oh man, the Braves should have got him. That would have been a steal. But as of right now, I'm not convinced that's the case. I think Jeff Hoffman's a solid arm, but I also think that the Braves, being that they had so many injuries last year, probably don't want to start on such rocky foundation. They probably want to get somebody that they can be confident in will be around, especially with questions around who's going to be back next year with Minter, and even if he is back, is he going to be able to pitch early on in the season? Joe Jimenez is out all year long. Strider, of course. There's a lot of concerns in that regard, and I think they probably want to spend their money wisely in a situation where, yeah, we would love a big-time reliever, but we don't want to spend it on a guy who's got health concerns. And I think Jeff Hoffman, name value alone, and based on what he did in 2024, deserves a contract like he got. But it doesn't surprise me that it wasn't a 5-year deal. It doesn't surprise me at all that they brought it down to a 3-year, $33 million deal. The Blue Jays view him as worth taking the shot on. They're not overly concerned about it, and they may be correct. But I don't blame the Braves, who have been injury-ridden for the past couple of seasons. I don't blame them at all for steering clear of it. That said, what I did think was funny at the end of the article I read was that the Braves were reached out to and they declined to comment on it. That tells you that the Braves don't leak anything, they don't talk about anything, and they're not going to. I found that kind of funny because we've grown over the years to know that nothing really comes out about what the Braves are up to unless the player they are contacting says it. And this did come from Jeff Hoffman, I believe, that the Orioles and the Braves decided not to go for it because of whatever previous injuries or whatever they saw in the MRIs. They didn't like it, obviously. One more guy we got to talk about tonight is, of course, Tanner Scott. Tanner Scott. Why have we not signed Tanner Scott? Will the Braves sign Tanner Scott? Will this happen? We've talked about Tanner Scott before. I cut a video I think about a month or two ago. Now, should the Braves be in the conversation for Tanner Scott? I think the simplest answer is absolutely yes. Tanner Scott has been great over the past couple of years. He's an elite lefty. You could potentially be losing A.J. Minter in the pen. You have questions surrounding your starting rotation. This could give you more security in the late innings. We saw the Braves give up some games this past year, not necessarily in the ninth because we had Raisel Iglesias, but in the 7th and 8th, a guy like Tanner Scott puts up just one more wall there in the late innings. I think that is pretty interesting. I think Tanner Scott, just on a I want that guy basis, just from seeing him play, we saw him in Miami. We've seen what he did with the Padres. I think a guy like Tanner Scott could really improve the Braves' bullpen and give Alex Anthopoulos the ability to build around not just one with Raisel Iglesias, but 2 elite relievers. Because right now, all due respect to everybody in our bullpen, we don't have that. We have a solid bullpen, but we don't have guys that are shut down, and that's it. Tanner Scott would be one of those guys. And I think that if you're going to compete in the playoffs, the bullpen's got to be a concern, right? We saw how meaningful the bullpen could be back in 21, right? The night shift. You had Matzik, who was untouchable. Will Smith, who didn't allow a run in the entirety of the playoffs. Richard Rodriguez that year was pretty good. You had a really solid pen, and that was just as beneficial as the offense was, right? Because our offense at that time was solid, but it wasn't what it was even in 2023. But one thing we had was bullpen. Luke Jackson had the best year of his career that season. I'm just thinking on top of my head guys that performed. And sure, we may have that in the pen right now. You may have a guy like, I think Grant Holmes is an excellent reliever. I think he could be a starter. I think he could really go either way. I think he fits whatever the team may need. I think that's Grant Holmes's current role right now. So in terms of Tanner Scott, the Braves should absolutely be in the conversation. I believe they are in the conversations. Now, some figures are throwing out $60 million. Some are throwing out $40 million. I don't know what the Braves are going to be willing to spend. I think, again, figuring out the starter, maybe not even spending money on the starter, but figuring out your starting situation, that is the priority. Whether it's we're going to compete from within, if that's what we're going with, then that's what we're going with. But if it's not that, I think Scott has got to be a priority here. He is by far the best reliever right now on the market. It's not really a question, especially for the value you're going to get. Hoffman was kind of the one other guy that people were really looking at. Scott's the guy. Now, the problem with that is Scott is the guy that's also going to get attention from the Dodgers, on the West Coast, by the way, with Padres, from the Yankees, who signed Max Fried to an exorbitant amount of money. So if you're getting into a bidding war with those guys, you got to come prepared. I don't know that the Braves are going to be willing to do that, especially if they only have this much amount before they go over the luxury tax. Again, they may hold. They may say, you know what, we're going to trust our guys. We're even going to explore options within our own system for the bullpen as well, because that's what we've been able to do, and we'll plug and play here and there. There's other arms out there for sure, but Tanner Scott is without a doubt getting the most attention right now, rightfully so, I would say. When we return, we are going to talk, of course, about we're gonna hear comments from you guys. We're gonna get what you guys want to talk about, and of course, I'm sure there's a lot of guys out there that want to hear maybe what I think about a certain potential trade or potential signing. Stay with us. We'll be right back, and we're getting straight into your comments.
In 2025, we're hammering down high prices at Glenn Smith GMC in Opelika. New GMC Sierra 4x4 crew cabs, discounted up to $12,000 off. GMC Terrain with a roomy cabin and pro safety, discounted up to $7,000 off. Enjoy the new year with no payments for 120 days. Choose from over 500 new and used vehicles on the lot or on the way. GlennSmith.com. Get ready to smile. In 2025, we're hammering down high prices at Glenn Smith Chevrolet in Opelika. New Chevy Silverado 4x4 crew cabs, discounted up to $12,000 off. Brand new 2025 Chevy Equinox, the compact SUV with high-tech features, discounted up to $5,000 off. Enjoy the new year with no payments for 120 days. Choose from over 500 new and used vehicles on the lot or on the way. GlennSmith.com. Get ready to smile.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. That was weird, but we're back, everybody. Thank you for being here tonight. Really do appreciate it. We're getting into your comments tonight. And one Ron says, what's up? What's up, Ron? Philip Hudson asks a pretty good question. Any major prospects playing for the Columbus Clingstones? Well, I don't know yet. We'll have to see kind of what happens in spring training, of course. I would venture to say a guy like Hurston Waldrop could be. I think that's going to be a training ground for guys that are ready to come up to the major leagues. Really, the exciting thing about the Clingstones, for those of you that don't know, I live in Columbus, so the fact that the Clingstones are moving to town, big deal around here. I know I have a largely Atlanta market for obvious reasons, but we are going to, of course, touch on the Clingstones as well. And I would say this. I think anytime you have a minor league team, the chances of you having a star come around is really increased at the AA level and the AAA level. When you're in single A, it's tough to really know. You may have a rehab stint here and there, but I think AA, is a good chance. Major prospects, I don't know if we have a major prospect that I can think of. Ask me that in about 2 months, and I can give you a better answer. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I know we've had some technical difficulties. We're trying to do a lot tonight. We're really trying to push the envelope of what we've done before. So for those of you out there that are like, what is going on with Tyler's stream? I'm trying, okay? So if we have technical difficulties, bear with me. Jake Hobby says, CeeLo says hello. Tell him I said thank you. And hello back. Mass Boost says there's pitching concerns. Braves just inked Rowdy Reyes. I've yet to figure out how to say his name. He is so young. He was not on my radar. He's 16 years old, but he throws over 100 miles an hour. Yeah, that's interesting. But I've heard that story before. I don't know that it's necessarily a huge deal. I want to see how he develops, and we'll see. Let's see. A lot of folks saying Wiley's the best. I see you there, Adolfo Rivera. Jake Hobby says, I hope McCann gets voted to Hall of Fame next week with Ichiro, Felix Hernandez, Andrew Jones, and Billy Wagner. You know, I love Brian McCann as much as anybody. As a fan, I really do. And I think he'll get some votes. I don't know. I doubt I doubt he'd be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't know if he has the resume to be in the Hall of Fame, but it would be nice. Don't get me wrong. I'm definitely more on the train of Andrew Jones and Billy Wagner. I think Ichiro is a given. Felix Hernandez, he has reasons for detractors to say, well, he didn't pitch that long at an excellent level. Andrew Jones is the greatest center fielder, at least defensively, I think, of all time. And the fact that he's not in the Hall of Fame yet is a travesty. I think it's a joke. And frankly, I think they need to fix it very soon. Billy Wagner is probably the greatest left-handed reliever of all time. I know he has the most saves as a lefty reliever. Outside of Aroldis Chapman, I think that was just broken. For Chapman to get in the Hall of Fame for his chances, which I think are valid, I think Billy Wagner's got to be inducted as well. The fact that those two guys aren't in yet is insane. I thought the same thing about Fred McGriff. The fact that he wasn't in at the time was just ridiculous. Jackson says, I don't care what Ian has or hasn't done lately, being in my mid-40s, having watched my Braves since the 80s in each rare time while stationed overseas. Well, thank you for your service. You helped my Braves win a World Series. You're good in my book. Yeah, no doubt about it. Let's see. A lot of folks in here. Mass Boost is in here. Blake Newsom is in here giving me hard eyes. Let's see. Oh, eating chocolate-covered crickets. Yeah, I forgot to ask Wiley about that. You guys got a super chat so I can see it. There's just a ton of comments in here. Let's see. Blake Newsom says, sounds like the Braves might trade for Monty after Sasaki signs out west. He's a pretty good lefty to quote-unquote replace Max with. Wanted him last year, personally. Maybe. I haven't really looked into that too much. I think the Braves, like Wiley said, are either going to focus on the free agent market, which I don't think is going to be very plentiful right now. I definitely think the trade market is going to be where they find their permanent fix for the starting rotation if they do it this year. But there are a lot of options within the system, right? And nobody wants to hear that. Nobody wants to hear that. But the fact that you do have Ian Anderson, the fact that you do have Bryce Elder, the fact that you do have A.J. Smith-Shawver, the potential's there. And I think this provides a unique opportunity that we haven't seen in a few seasons now to really give those guys a shot. And if they're able to do it successfully, then what a turn of events that will be. All right, I'm going to address this. Mass Boost. Quit getting on me about my advertisements. They sponsor me. They pay me. I got to run them. It's in the contract I signed. I'm just kidding. I love you guys. But I do, yes, Glenn Smith Chevrolet, great partner with us. If the ads get old, sorry. It's not that I try to overload you guys. I have signed an agreement. I do run those ads, and they're great supporters of the channel, and we love what they do. I will try not to run as many, But yes, they are going to run. I have to do it. But I will do what I can for you. Sometimes I run them just to help me get reset after an interview like Wiley, just to help me get back to a normal situation and back to a normal, I guess, director room, I guess is the way to put it. It just helps me get reset. It helps me stall a little bit to get back to where I can direct. Keep in mind, guys, it's a one-man show. So I do what I can, but I'll do. Okay, it's the YouTube ads. Okay, now I don't feel bad. I can't control that. That's YouTube. That is the corporate world at you that I can't help. A lot of people are saying Tanner Scott will be a Met. Well, the way they spend money, probably. I got to be honest. I'm not scared of the Mets, and I feel like I should be because they're willing to spend all this money. But they spent all this money before. They've done this before, and it didn't work. Right? You remember a few years ago they went and signed Scherzer and Verlander. You remember that? I just have seen this play out before, and there is no deal that is north of $500 million that ever works out well. None. And I say that. I'm comfortable saying that with Shohei Ohtani. I'm comfortable saying that with Juan Soto. I'm comfortable saying that really with any of them. None of them turn out good. None of these big-time deals ever age well. I've yet to see one that I'm like, yeah, that team got their money's worth. No, never. So they can have Juan Soto. He's a great talent. I just don't think he's a bat that's worth that much money. But that's what happens, right? Player salaries are going to keep going up because they're going to keep saying, well, I want mine to be slightly higher than Shohei Ohtani's or slightly higher now than Juan Soto's. I want to have the biggest contract of all time. And really, it's the players' union, too. That's part of it as well. So, I don't know. I personally am just not really fearing the Mets. I would love for the Braves to be able to get Tanner Scott. I think that would be huge for Atlanta. I think that would really shore up our pin. Blake Newsom says, I believe that Atlanta is really close on Tanner Scott. They're also talking to Profar, a Curacao kid. AA does love signing relievers in free agency. I think you're right. I think relievers... If you're not wanting to go over the luxury tax prior to the season, I think that relievers are the way to go. I think that originally I said that I think we need to sign a starter. I still think that's the case. I think you could trade for one possibly with a package like, I don't know, Ian Anderson and Bryce Elder could land something. I don't know what, but I think that'd be more of a salary cutting thing than anything for the opposite team. But ultimately, I think the Braves could very well ride on their inner options, and we talked about that, and how bad would it really be for a competition between A.J. Smith-Shawver, Bryce Elder, Ian Anderson, Darius Vines is still in the mix in there, Alan Winans is still in the mix. I think your guys there, I think you could definitely find a spot for one of those guys. I think you could fill a spot with those guys. I worry about covering two. That's what I would worry about. Let's see. Blake Newsom says, getting a player 3 years later than most would and at lowest value with health does scream Braves, doesn't it? They do those things, and it got us Josh Donaldson, Chris Sale, Kenley Jansen. Well, that's kind of what I was looking at with Scherzer is, well, I didn't think Chris Sale would be the Cy Young in 2024. So it is tough to really point out. I don't think, though, Chris Sale was kind of a fluke injury. Josh Donaldson was an interesting case. I think he was not fluke injury, but just had some weird situations over the years that didn't really turn out for him year to year, and coming to Atlanta was a great change of pace. Kenley Jansen, I think, really didn't have, I think he had maybe one or two bad seasons, nothing prolonged, but coming to Atlanta did seem to help him. I don't know if Max Scherzer has that. He's 41 years old. By the way, we share a birthday. He's turning 41 on July 27th. So he's going to be 41 years old. And at 41 years old, I just don't know that you still are able to do what you did at 35. I just don't know, right? Like, we all thought Charlie Morton might be calling it quits, right? Or something along those lines. I mean, I think as long as somebody will pay Max Scherzer a reasonable price, he's going to pitch. But again, he hasn't reached 50 innings over the past 2 years. Maybe that means he's rested up. I don't know. But I'm just curious to see what happens there. Let's see. Mass Boo says they did a study on long-term contracts of 7 or more years, and only one was maybe good. All the others have been bad. Exactly. And I would much rather have a 10-year contract with Acuna and a 7-year contract with Ozzie Albies for $10 and $5 million apiece than have Juan Soto signed to an exorbitant amount for forever. I just don't see the benefit there. Even the Tatis contract didn't age well, and that's a young player. You know, I mean, he still can play, don't get me wrong, but you had the issue with I guess, the steroid cream or whatever. I don't want to get technical there, but I'm just saying things happen, and you have to be able to eat whatever that contract is. Look, Acuna, as bad as last year was and as bad as losing him in 21 was, well, it ended okay in 21, but you get my point. As bad as losing him last year was, even Strider last year, as bad as that is, it would have been a whole heck of a lot worse if we were paying them $50 million apiece for last year. That would have just felt bad, right? Because then that just completely sinks everything that you're trying to do. So I don't know. Let's see. Look. Great players have signed bad contracts. I think about Albert Pujols. I think about Mike Trout, right, who signed a huge deal in the past few years, hasn't been able to perform at his highest level. He's had moments, but not full seasons. Miguel Cabrera fell off. It's tough, right? We saw Scherzer, Verlander. They didn't even sign long contracts, but they signed 3-year deals at age 40 for $40 million a year. Or whatever. I mean, it's not gonna age well. And I feel like there's just nobody in the room going, I don't know if this is a good idea. Right? And all due respect to the Mets, even though I shouldn't, I just don't think they're the brightest bulb in Major League Baseball. I just don't. I don't think they think about deals. I think they spend money and hope for the best. And when you have money to spend, sometimes that can hurt you more than help you, because I look at the Braves. The Braves have money to spend now, but for a long time they focused on their inner prospects and who we can grow. We're going to rebuild, and I look at the Brewers, who are really good at maximizing value and getting more out of less. And look, I mean, the Mets, the Yankees, the Dodgers, we have a high payroll too, but the gap between the Braves payroll and those payrolls are substantial. And the fact that they're able to spend that kind of money on one player, yes, they have a higher payroll, but that still doesn't mean that that player should have 50% of the payroll for that year. It just shouldn't be the case, or even a third of it, right? Yeah, to me, you get more for your money if you have, I don't know, if you have your core locked up for, let's say, $100 million, right? Let's say your infield catcher and 2 outfielders are locked up for $100 million, right? Okay, well, now I have $100 million that I can go, okay, what relievers can I go get? What starters can I go get? And to me, I think that's, I don't know. The Braves have always worked in a way that made a lot of sense to me. And the Mets have always worked in a way, and the Phillies have always worked in a way that didn't. The Phillies have made more sense recently, but the Mets don't. They flat out don't. I've never agreed that Bryce Harper should get paid $400 million at the time. And now that seems like nothing. Now it seems like that's worth it. And the Braves still haven't touched that. So the highest deal on the Brave, I want to say, is like $20 million a year, and that's it. And I don't think they'll go over that. Let's see. Yeah, we got 4 more years of Acuna, 3 with Albies. Looks like we're going to have a new TV contract. Yeah, I'm interested to see how that works out. I'm really curious to see how that works out. But what do you guys think? What is it out there that you guys want the Braves to do? right? I've heard a lot of people talk about the loss of Travis d'Arnaud and questions surrounding Sean Murphy, obviously the starting pitching, the bullpen, shortstop is a concern earlier in the year. What is it that you think the Braves really need to go do? There's a deal out there that is just obvious. Because to me, right now, I don't really see one. And that's kind of where I think we've had this long time of just nothing happening, right? Other than Jared Kelenic coming to an agreement for $2.3 million to stay with the Braves. There just is not a lot of tweets going on where we feel like we're moving in a positive direction. I think something's going to happen soon. I just couldn't imagine it going this much longer. I think you're either going to see relievers start getting locked up or at least one starter. I think something's got to give. That said, though, guys, we're going to wrap it up there. Want to thank you again for tuning in tonight. Really do appreciate it. You guys could have been anywhere. You decided to come here. Really do appreciate that. Thank you to Wiley Ballard, who took the time again on his vacation to join this show and didn't even question it. I said, hey, man, love to have you. He goes, send me some dates. Can't thank him enough again. And thank you guys again for being here. Thank you to everybody who commented. Thank you to everybody who liked the video. That's the biggest thing you can do. We are trying to get to 6,000 subscribers prior to opening day. We'd love to do it. Prior to spring training would be even better. We are going to provide weekly content. We're going to try to do some more interviews. If the interview is buggy today, we'll work on it. I'm doing what I can. But we're doing what we can to provide you some good quality Braves content in the off season. And look, finding off season content is harder than you think it might be. So I really appreciate you taking the time to watch. Thank you to our sponsor, of course, Glenn Smith Chevrolet GMC in Opelika. They will get you smiling better than anybody in a new car. And again, out of all the thank yous, the biggest one goes out to you guys for watching, and we hope you will continue to do that. Tell a friend, watch our content. We got more coming up soon. We may have a surprise guest next week too, so make sure to tune in for that. And now that we know this kind of works, we will continue to do that kind of thing. So again, thank you for watching tonight. We'll see you next time at On Deck.
Baseball fans, make sure you like and share this video and subscribe to this channel. As always, thank you for your support.